All right, good evening, everybody. Hello, and welcome to DIA, and welcome to Readings in Contemporary Poetry. I'm Megan Whitco. I'm an assistant curator here, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's poetry reading. I'm also greatly excited and pleased to welcome our two poets who are joining us tonight for our program, Rosa Alcala and Laynie Browne. Thank you both for being here with us this evening. And we also want to extend a big thanks to Levy Gorvey Gallery, who provides major support for this series. And we also receive public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, as well as the Brooklyn Rail, which is our media sponsor. And we also, lastly, we want to thank Brooklyn Brewery for supplying the complimentary cold beverages and all of DIA's staff, but particularly Andrea Villa and Max Tonone. So this evening, we won't be having an intermission between our two poets, but following the readers, we have a great selection of book titles by both poets, a few titles for sale up front, as well as the Readings in Contemporary Poetry book that DIA produced in 2016. So please stay, check out the books, chat, and grab another beer then if you would like. And without any further ado, I would like to introduce Vincent Katz, who has curated this series at DIA since 2010, and he will be introducing our first reader for this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Just like to mention that our final reading of this season will take place on May 14th, and the readers will be Jean Day and Alan Bernheimer, so please come back for that one. First reader will be Rosa Alcala. Rosa Alcala is a poet and translator originally from Paterson, New Jersey, who's published 3 books of poetry: Undocumentaries, Shearsman Books, 2010, The Lust of Unsentimental Waters, Shearsman, 2012, and My Other Tongue, Future Poem, 2017. Her poems appear in American Poets in the 21st Century, Poetics of Social Engagement, among other anthologies. Recent publications include 2 edited volumes, Cecilia Vicuña, New and Selected Poems, and Spit Temple, the selected performances of Cecilia Vicuña. Alcalá teaches in the Department of Creative Writing and the bilingual MFA program at the University of Texas at El Paso. Rosa Alcala is one of the most dynamic poets writing today. By that, I mean her observations, stances, and the language and rhythms she chooses to couch them in are always surprising and fresh. Another thing I like is that her musical phrases are so craftily welded together that it's difficult to quote an excerpt. One is forced to take in the entire stanza whole. Here's one from her first book, Undocumentaries. From tourist fat to kingdom of nil, the bus loops to where I tinker at sandwiches without spoiling the natural sullenness of my kind. I like the at in her phrase, tinker at sandwiches, as opposed to with, for instance. Do you see what I mean? It is very carefully considered, and yet, simultaneously, it feels completely natural. How does she do that? Also, words are enabled to take on double meanings. Kind, for instance, means type, but somehow in Alcala's hands means kindness as well. Nothing is gratuitously humorous in these poems, as it is in a lot of contemporary poetry, and yet almost every phrase bears wit that brings a smile to your lips. I end up reading these poems with a greater interest, wanting to find out what they are saying while the pleasure lasts or after it subsides. Please welcome Rosa Alcala.
Hi, everybody. Wow, thanks, Dia. This is really nice. Thanks, Vincent. Thanks, Megan. I'm staying in a really nice apartment in Soho. I feel really, really lucky. My family's here, extended My brothers are here. My extended family, my nephew. They all came in from New Jersey. This never happens. They never come to my readings all together. So maybe it should have been with Vincent instead of at. I'm thinking that it should have been with. How's everybody doing? Yeah? Good, I'm glad. This is a nice space. So I think I'm going to read from three things. The future poem book that was published, My Other Tongue. My future poem editors are here. I love them. They're wonderful. And then I'm going to read from some new work, and I'm going to read one translation, a translation that I did of a poem by Cecilia Vicuña from the 60s, which is, the book is available for sale out there. Always be closing, Rosa, right? So I think I'll begin with the translation. I'm so happy to be reading with Laynie Browne. I love Laynie Browne. We're both referencing textile in our work, which I don't know, Vincent, did you have that in mind when you put us together, or was it just coincidence? You work by intuition alone. Okay. So I'm going to start with the translation, and I'm just going to make sure, maybe I'll time myself because I have no sense of space-time. Make sure that I don't go over. So this is a poem by Cecilia Vicuña from 1970. And I'm going to read the Spanish version, and then I will read my translation. This is called La Compañía de los Sueños, Aviso Económico. La compañía tiene por objeto realizar los sueños nocturnos del cliente. Si usted tiene un sueño, escribe a la compañía que se encargará de reunir a todos los personajes del sueño en el ambiente natural del sueño. La compañía no garantiza la total realización del sueño. El azar no depende de ninguna compañía. La compañía no falseará los sentimientos de ningún personaje por medio de la instrucción. Si usted ha soñado que es besado por una antigua amante en la cumbre de la montaña, la compañía devolverá a su amante a la cumbre de la montaña, pero usted será besado. The Dream Company Classified Ad. The company's objective is to fulfill nocturnal dreams for its client. If you have a dream, write to the company, who will see to it that all the characters in your dream be gathered in a natural dream environment. The company cannot guarantee total realization of the dream. Chance does not answer to a company. The company will not re-educate any character to falsify emotion. If in a dream you were kissed by an old lover on a mountaintop, the company will place your lover on that mountaintop once again. But will you be kissed? This poem is from My Other Tongue. This started off as a letter to my mother and became a letter to all Marias. My mother was named Maria. Dear Maria, dear Mary, Mariah, Marie, dear Mama, Mamacita, and Mommy, dear fourth wheel of the Trinity, dear Puerto Rican ingenue in a red sash, dear off with their heads, dear diva, dear aria missing its M, dear storage engine, dear ships in your name, dear asteroid discovered in 1877, dear song by Café Tacuba, Green Day, The Jacksons, Men at Work, Blondie, Ricky Martin, Wu-Tang Clan, et al. Dear Maria, spoken in the bird's tale of Papua New Guinea, how do you solve a problem like Maria? Dear pool-type reactor, dear uranium, how you enrich us, dear Spanish biscuit, dear sacrificial virgins of red or blonde hair, of dark brunette, of the slip apron or veil but never a hat, of the fresh complexion turned composite, of Jack the Ripper's complete works, of fluency in Welsh, Spanish, English, Quechua, French, of obscure and undocumented origins, and of las colonias, querida María de los Ángeles de la Luz de Jesús del Refugio, walking home or waiting for transporte de personal without executive safe routes. Dear Señorita Maquiladora, dexterous, tolerant of tedium, model workers for Lexmark, Foxconn, Comscope, etc. Dear Queen of the Plasma TV and Print Cartridge, dear Miss Stainless Steel Appliance, dear Crowned with Cigarettes, soda cans, boot prints, dear Left Without Nipples in the Desert branded, dear Virgen de Guadalupe, hand us your sanitary napkin, blessed art thou, your blood is on everything. This is called Paramour. Whoopsies. Paramour. English is dirty, polyamorous. English wants me. English rides with girls and with boys. English keeps an open tab and never sleeps alone. English is a smooth talker who makes me say, please. It's a bit of role-playing, and I like a good tease. We have a safe word I keep forgetting. English likes pet names. English has a little secret, a past, another family. English is going to leave them for me. I've made English a set of keys. English brings me flowers stolen from a grave. English texts me, slips in as emojis, attaches selfies not suitable for work. English has rules but accepts dates last minute. English makes booty calls. English makes me want it. When I was younger, my parents said, keep that English out of our house. If you leave with that miserable, don't come back. I said, God willing, in the language of the Inquisition. I climbed out my window but always got caught. English had a hoopty that was the joint. Now my mother goes gaga over our cute babies. Together, English and I wrote my father's obituary. How many times have I said it's over and English just laughs and says, come on, senorita, let's go for Chinese. We always end up in a fancy hotel where we give fake names, and as I lay my head to hear my lover breathe, I dream of Sam Patch plunging into water, a poem English gave me that had been given to another. Do you know who Sam Patch is? He shows up in William Carlos Williams Patterson, right, where I'm from, so there's kind of an interest for me, and I mean, I'm interested in Williams, but also that book for that reason. But he's a 19th century daredevil. It's one of the historical figures that shows up. And he died sort of performing this, I think like in the Genesee Falls. He jumped in the Genesee Falls and then was found after it thawed in the spring. So that was his last performance. So, word of caution to you all, if you're ever gonna do that. So this is called voice activation. Okay. So voice activation begins with an epigraph from Wittgenstein from Zettel. Do not forget that a poem although it is composed in the language of information, is not used in the language game of giving information.
And, luckily...
Oh, hold on, back up.
This poem, on the other hand, is activated by the sound of my voice, and, luckily, I am a native speaker. Luckily, I have no accent and you can understand perfectly what I am saying to you via this poem. I have been working on this limpid voice, from which you can read each word as if rounded in my mouth, as if my tongue were pushing into my teeth, my lips meeting and jaws flexing, so that even if from birth you've been taught to read faces before words and words as faces, you'll feel not at all confused with what I say on the page. But maybe you'll see my name and feel a twinge of confusion. Have no doubt, my poem is innocent and transparent. So when I say, I think I'll make myself a sandwich, the poem does not say, I drink an aisle of bad trips. Or if I say, my mother is dying, where's her phone? The poem does not say, try other at spying, spare us or phone. One way to ensure the poem and its reader no misunderstanding is to never modulate. I'm done with emotion, I'm done, especially, with that certain weakness called exiting one's intention. What I mean is Spanish. What a mess that is, fishing for good old American bread, and ending up with a boatload of uncles and their boxes of salt cod, a round of ants poking for fat in your middle. So you see, Wittgenstein, even the sandwich isn't always made to my specifications, it's the poem that does what I demand. Everything else requires a series of steps. I call the nurse's station and explain to the nurse, her accent thick as thieves, that I'd like to speak to my mother. She calls out to my mother, it's your daughter really, she says this in Spanish, but for the sake of voice activation and this poem, you understand I can't go there, and she hands the phone to my mother, and my mother, who is not the poem, has trouble understanding me. So I write this poem, which understands me perfectly, and never needs the nurse's station, and never worries about unintelligible accents, or speaking loudly enough, or the trouble with dying, which can be understood as a loss of language. If so, the immigrant, my mother, has been misunderstood for so long. This death is from her last interpreters.
Oh. Poison Arrow, remember that song? ABC? It used to be, you know how U2 kind of like shoved their new album onto your iTunes? So for a long time, it would go straight to U2. And I just felt so put upon by U2. Like, why does U2 have to play after my poem? But I'm okay with ABC following it. Okay. So I think I'm going to read some new work now. So I'm working on two manuscripts, one that I think is sort of coming along more easily than another one, but one is Frey, and it references textile, and Laynie and I were talking about how both of our work reference textile coincidentally, and we're reading together. So I wanted to pick out some of the ones that are more explicitly about textile. And I've always written about textile. My mother worked in a textile factory as a spinner for many years, from the age of 14 until she was 38. And then my dad worked in a dye house in Paterson. So, and we lived around the old silk mills. So textile is this thing that's just a reference for me a lot, just a familiar reference, and just a reference to where I grew up. So the first poem I'm going to read is Fashion's Cycle, and this is the one that's on the web page. And I wrote this after the Rana Plaza, the building collapse in Bangladesh in 2013. Do you remember this? It was like sort of 8 or 9 floors of this building, and within this building was a textile factory. So I read this really moving interview with one of the women who survived that, and I was thinking about how complicit we are, in the things that we wear and the things that we buy, and in the system called capitalism, and in these tragedies. So this is about that. It's called Fashion's Cycle, after Rana Plaza. To be born is to risk the ghost of a factory collapse, to try it on in intervals in front of the mirror. I loved the baby doll dress like no other. I can see it. I can see a hand reaching out to her brother as if to say, "We will make it out of here." I wore it out the door. Industrial sign language. And this was based on I went to a textile museum in Spain where there was a documentary about women who worked in this textile factory, and they had invented this sign language, which I later learned is not uncommon in places that are very noisy. It's called industrial sign language. The workers make up their way of communicating with each other. So it's called industrial sign language. In the corduroy silence of a textile museum, a woman weaves her hands in the air and laughs. "We weren't just operators," she says, "but inventors of a secret language the overseers could not read. It was the only way to be heard above din of machine. They thought we were keeping rhythm with warp and weft, that every movement of our wrists kept the thread moving from right to left, but in plain sight we wove dirty jokes and rumors, recipes for how to have and not have a baby. What sign did she not make in the documentary No Visitor Watches to the End? What noise could she not overcome, even though overseer is long buried and factory shut down? Did index finger to eye as the mechanic made his rounds mean, "Watch out, compañera, that one gets handsy"? Just as on blogs, newspapers, tweets, across entire industries, women are gesturing, "Ojo, ojo, ojo." Did they ever become tired of all the signage? Did they ever want to throw up their hands and walk out, let the whole production come to a halt in one tangled mess? For them, it probably wasn't an option. Among the weavers, deafness was a chronic condition. Capitalism Ritual. This is about trying to find something to wear for my mother's burial. There's at least one, there's a few people here who will understand this scenario. I mean, among my family in this particular instance. Probably many of you, maybe in your own instances. Capitalism Ritual. The boutique owner pulled from racks variations on the same pricely. I'm going to start over, I'm sorry. Capitalism Ritual. The boutique owner pulled from racks variations on the same pricey and shapeless dress. And as I tried them on, she whispered into the fitting room, I wanted to burn everything I wore the next day, and let me go into the cheap, cold night to borrow a t-shirt and skirt from someone's giveaway pile. I was rehearsing the ritual of shedding and casting off to the underworld and to the developing. She who keeps a dress perfectly suited to the burial of the mother will never break down behind a curtain should be a proverb. Later, I walked through any store and bought the first thing I saw. It'll change your life, the sales associate said, as she rubbed the $40 cream into the back of my hand. It just sinks into the skin. Okay. I just have two more. Am I doing okay on time? Does that sound good? Okay. I don't want to be one of those people. I've been one of those people. I just don't want to be that person tonight. This is called You and Your Mother's Advice. Run into a school if a man is chasing you. Run into a church. Fall in love with art and mess up your dress. Dream all you want, but baste before you sew. Ring someone's doorbell, ask to use their phone. Priests are men too. Better yet, stay home. If you skimp, you soak. If you boil, skim the foam. In war, as in love, every hole is a trench. Devil you know or end up alone. Even the prettiest mole can sprout a whisker. Tell me who you walk with and I'll tell you who you are. Run into a store, shop until you're safe. Run into a hospital, any public place. Do not take rides. Do not lead him to your car or door. Key him in the eye, knee him in the balls. Do not tell your brothers, they'll kill him. If you must, tell the killer you love him. Then run toward headlights, never the woods. A man will tell you he loves you to keep you from books. Tell a nurse, dissimulate. Have the sense not to get caught shoplifting. Keep your mouth shut when you laugh. Keep your business off the curb. It's all in the sofrito, just watch and learn. Do not tell your friend her man tried to kiss you as you slept on their couch after the engagement party. Everyone will blame you. They'll call you mosquita muerta. They'll call you phony. Keep a plant on your desk, straighten up before you leave. A good dancer isn't always the best husband. Steer clear of white jeans, dispose properly of sanitary napkins. Get pregnant and your father will kill you. Never say no to a party. Las malas lenguas can wag all they want once the music's over. And this is my last one. So the one I just read in this one is from another series of poems called You, and they're all in the second person. You and the Raw Bullets. Why the image just now of a bullet entering the mouth? Why call it raw when it isn't sticky and pink like a turkey meatball, just the usual, gold and shiny and cylindrical? What about this bullet is uncooked? Why does it multiply with you in parka or short skirt versions of the you that you were, swallowing raw bullets as you walked? The images come without assailant, without gun, just the holes the bullets open, the holes through which they went. And now at the age in which you ride enclosed in glass, like the Pope or President, you are spitting up the bullets, slow simmered in your own juices. You are shitting them out, feeling them drop from you in clumps of blood in the days of bleeding left. But you cannot expel all of them. Some, raw as the day they entered, have expanded their mushroom heads into the flesh or lodged their hot tip into the taste center of the brain. Will the tongue's first encounter with pomegranate seeds be forever a lost Eden, that fruit of your girlhood, which, also meaning grenade, was perhaps never innocent? Do your own raw bullets come back to you, my friends? Let us legislate the active voice instead. Not many bodies have been used as blanks, aluminum cans, but here are the men who pulled the trigger. Look at them. Thank you.
Laynie Browne is an editor, poet, prose writer, and teacher. She's the author of the poetry collections Pollen Memory, Daily Sonnet, among others. Pollen Memory, Daily Sonnets, The Scented Fox, selected by Alice Notley for the National Poetry Series, The Desires of Letters, Lost Parcours Psalms, Scorpion Odes, Practice, You Envelop Me, published by Omnidawn in 2017, and hot off the presses from Tender Buttons, In Garments Worn by Lindens. We have it here, and it's its first appearance in New York City, I'm told. So check it out. Browne teaches at University of Pennsylvania and at Swarthmore College. Laynie Browne is one of the most assiduous poets working today in the conscious melding of poetry and prose in her writing. Favoring neither, she instead mines the possibilities of their overlaps, their interleavings. There's a lot of gentleness in her poetry, which distinguishes it. While many poets settle for easy, crowd-pleasing effects, Browne prefers to focus on moments that almost pass unnoticed. Her attention brings a calm to the reader. Later, everything is later is a typical kind of sententia she likes to sprinkle in her texts. The day presses, and I resist, is another line from the same poem. On the facing page, a one-liner, in this case, spring is in the paper dress, wear carefully and last to save trees. As in many of Browne's books, this is a format for the entire project. One notices how she has rhymed presses and dress across the page. She is so attentive to those kinds of correspondences. Her daily sonnets take a different approach, with simple language easily spread in lines that embody the sonnet form in all its elasticity. They give themselves up to the obligations and confirmations of family circumstances. One begins, I have a friend I'd like to see who exhausts me. When we went away, it was still summer. I was still wearing this circlet to bed. Before getting swept up in the mayhem and music of little children, then settling in again to the final two lines, this music repeats itself night after noon, accompanying affectionate newts in all endeavor. Welcome to the intimate world of Laynie Browne. Please welcome Laynie Browne.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Vincent, and Rosa for your beautiful reading, and Dia. And also I want to thank Leanne Browne and Tender Buttons for this beautiful book. I'm going to be reading mostly from this book and a little bit from a forthcoming book. I've been writing a series of books I'm calling Maj Tex that I'm writing for the women poets who made me. So this book was born in this room when I heard Rosemary Waldrop read From Lawn of Excluded Middle, a book I've returned to over and over through the decades. And while I was sitting right in this room, I thought I need to write something in conversation with this book, because every time I come back to it, something else happened. So this book, all the titles are taken from Lawn of Excluded Middle, and they are kind of resounded as the work, as a sequence progresses, and the form is similar to Lawn of Excluded Middle prose poems. When I say that women have a soul, I return to her extracts, Subliminal Guides. Whether the menstruum is perfectly transparent or slightly tinted, one thought wraps arms and legs around another. Sinewy tinctures and malformed abbreviations stand in for an inability to represent depths. We teach our bodies to stroll inventing solace in the gaze of another. We teach thought to unfold and in tumbling retrieve the unexpected. Strained through muslin, an uncanny aftertaste, hint of tannins inflected with moonlight. Her sentences were patterns, intrinsically inset. They lent meaning to those ensconced nearby, a network of tunnels one could intuit or travel, and yet the only way to inhabit them was to enter your own fathoming or particular bloodstream. As if words were passports, her sentences spoke to my sentences, and in turn, I learned language was talented in itself. I placed myself near her scripted gardens and sunken entanglements. Years proceeded into inherited vegetation, silt unguents, pod salves, delicately precise scents, and signatures of purring hillsides. I came home within a slope of intent I recognized primarily by touch. Do you believe in breath as a method of divining margins? Do you quicken your outer bodies in an attempt to match auras seen only in late afternoon? How did we arrive in the pre-hints of sunsets? Against my own revulsion, I continued realizing that only by entering falsehoods, abrupt hours, and dismissive skeins would I be spoken to directly. As if a picture pre-existing our acknowledgement does not exist. When you enter the frame, you have clearly begun to designate your own edges and then to disintegrate. Still, the eye is a camera. So this is how it happens. The rush of crinolines taken off and abandoned in favor of soft cotton, spiderwebs brushed away. In the same action, I wish for the structure of firmly skirted days, which hold a clear form of my choosing. How to photograph that which by definition you cannot see. I admire the strength and flexibility of silk, the patient spinning, eyelashes softening in the light. You wander into taller futures, confident skeletons, and compositions more complicated than the musical steps taken to arrive. Even if a woman sits at a loom, slowly I learned that to pull her sentences apart was also to pull apart individual bodies. One had to learn them in relation. A sequence of words placed in one's mouth become more intimate with familiarity. The charge deepens in texture, skin beneath the surface swells red. Her words suffuse my articulations until my tongue became that animal whose thirst betrayed a preference for complication. How might I transcribe thought when meaning itself is another sort of well, the original place of meeting? We carry our vessels and return to the source. We must close our eyes to conceive of heaven. White powder with an undertone of gold catches the light on the outer lid, the globe of the eye. We are instructed to approximate shimmer, suggest depth, open, wider and wilder, find the subtle green in hazel, emphasize our apparatus of sight. But being seen is an action we cannot control, even given tapered applications, soft lighting, and ambient sound. Your music lit my tongue. First, we look to inhabit the surfaces of letters as if words were passengers. With no other proximate skin, what else might we have done? Superlatives dim and glitter fades. If even shadow is a carefully wrapped package sent with love, what are we to make of the word love, containing both Lo and Eve? Wishcraft, slanting, the naked figure. I read your messages lightly tinted with sapinwood, and now am no longer alone. A few simple words graze my lips, light votives. You cup with your hand and turn your back on the larger light, descending to protect a tiny flame. We close our eyes to conceive of discretion. A bright center of attention may be interpreted as warmth or may singe. I can't pretend I am alone when nearby me a child, no longer a child, no longer requires my presence. Ghosts of grammar. In order to be revealed, something first must be hidden. Layers were invisible, then binding, and finally trailed off into simple loops and pliable flourishes. I listened to her words as she spoke, very close to the edges of soluble perception. Fingers flew along roads lined with fabric, along certain sad-drenched songs. Her voice resounded in double register, prepared to receive red dye. First, I was a grown woman, then a creature steeped in milk, a she molded or sculpted. Where doubt had once lain was now a visible passage to breathing volumes, cloth maidens. I met her earlier register in myself, a very pale page. Can I walk in your sleep? Meeting earlier selves makes me shiver. What if your books hadn't been placed in my passage? What if I didn't recognize your words, which guided me toward a latent pause I only now begin to understand? In the bodily lexicon, weft comes before arrival, waits against bloom. Which thread did she wring remote, as if each decade were a map, a middle way along the journey? The dark wood repeats itself between expression and consent, and brooks written in drowned sentences. Which origin of lace does she hear as she works at the broom in garments worn by lindens? Or bone with sentence structure. So I'm going, so I'm gone. You are the flower I address, umbra slanting the naked trigger. I loved you more than my name. So the shadow, so you danced. So I leapt into the flexed decade and then the vexed. This being all that ahead, substance of once had been. I loved you more than symptoms, synonyms, or categories of midnight. A shadow fell onto the tree, but the shadow was still surrounded by flight. My love was deep and therefore lasted only the space of 1 second. All I wanted was to walk in your keep, a deferral from dressing, as if every interaction were an interview, a pause from presenting oneself, how long it takes, and the pleasure or horror of getting it right. A humble shelf Why so much care about the envelope? Her book informed me of the terms I was to investigate. How the space inside the body sees or reflects, and sight, as in the subjunctive. For a red curve to smile, it needs a mouth around it. When you move your lips, words penetrate deeply into your mouth, then further into your chest. No longer willing to meet, a word with one syllable remains suspended, yet meaning is not an object which can be stolen or locked away in the nonsense of lungs. The unused cast of characters within me. Next door is obviously the witch's house, steep roof, unpaved road. Except for modern vehicles in the drive, you might be sure. How to ever find your own dearest failings, unproven desires. The stone face was once iconic, but when large trees were removed and light flooded bare pitch, we wondered, apart from crystal-paned windows and axes sunk in fallen yarn, the new antenna made us pause. Which forms of primeval transmission have we missed? How do persons of dough or birds wearing clothes invent reception? A crowning mirage or question. On the endless green slopes of doing nothing, mother of all nomadic propositions, does fire contain substance? Colors confide. Blue, smooth by iron. Red, ephemera straight or tinctured. Yellow, piano plenty. No machinery is involved. The air smelled of sheep, live craters of indigo. Twist threads, inscribe words, stroke by stroke. Even after crowning departure, clearly the journey would mean growing bolder. Look up, inside the narrow staircase, vertiginous effect. If you can't see the names, look harder into the boiling cauldron in which you stand. The book occurs over months and years, bent over a horizontally placed womb. Disembodied on paper. I did not know how to state my problems with narrativity without inventing words and rigorous alternatives to reason. To paraphrase volition, graspers were too busy to be cognizant of giving. For instance, I confused the word generosity with gorgiosity. I confused giving with love and taking with nothing. And so I took nothing, not the real nor the eventual. I kept only what I imagined. Then I took myself outside the story emanated from my own mouth. I carried myself beyond the prone blue body of night. Here I can easily see my mistake. By light of the hewn, your faithlessness would not reach all the way to your face. You struck a match on my attention. What was inside or cascading down the body, a waning power, undressing sentences to find nothing beneath our future bodies not yet formed. Walk with me toward that other nothingness, the one which is all promise, the one in which nothing is forbidden, no chalice, no hand, and every invocation unbound. A concept is more than a convenience. At first, all words resembled each other, like fingers at the edge of a lake. You tried on costumes, afraid of bruising the inventions of nakedness. I gasped for light, then lost myself in billows of a non-entity called time. Finally, I swallowed too much solidity in an attempt to match what appeared sturdy outside myself. You wanted your schedule to match absent telepathy. My vices were pets. I loved them because they refused to dress possibility, fair bodies of unseen prose. So I want to finish by just reading a few poems from another manuscript forthcoming. And this is a book for the poet C.D. Wright. And she has a title called Translation of the Gospel Back into Tongues, which is such a great title, right? So my book for her is called Translation of the Lilies Back into Lists. And I started out with trying to understand my obsession with lists. Basically, I wanted to take my to-do lists and translate them into poems in order to escape them somehow and do something else productive besides the things on the list. So they are, the titles are dates, and they're numbered lists, but I don't read the numbers or the dates. So I'll just read 3 of these. Your voluminous collection is currently being housed in a small bird flying without direction. And if the bird should fail, these images are designed to continue as you close your eyes or begin plummeting. What is peril to a bird? First, recline in ink and paper a series of concentric ribbons, revelation. Quilt a sector of arms, collaborative daughters. Walk through frozen woods, basilisk on your arm, red hoofed. The only harm you encounter is an imaginary enclosure which prevents the foretold meeting. Rapturously step out of the cavity of this breathing animal. Furiously forget yourself, then complete the online forms. Confirm, gingerbread meeting, talisman, and tarot with Emily Dickinson. Bring baskets, string, aprons, and books. Explain how her bodiless white dress, suspended in glass, is a perfect fit. How notes are poems and also tasks. At some point, his solitary intensity turned to daggers and sloth. I walked up the paper with a neighbor discussing the need to get away. He'll say we must repave, but I'd prefer to endlessly stall. How different she looks when certain words emit their glow. She wore them around her neck, bound them to her thoughts, rested her face in a nest. It's all right to begin what seems distant. In fact, interrupt yourself now. My goal is to keep switching back and forth between doing and being until I disintegrate. The correct music never discusses your mood. Instead, it elevates or deflates. Form continues to morph. At first, I translated abbreviations into commentaries, opening an accordion-like discourse. But then, what was already there between the pleats began demanding a say. Finally, I've noticed that by the time I arrive, parenthetical graveyards have been inserted, secret obsessions slain. Hours begin instantaneously without allowing protest or assent. It's like trying to board a bus or a train at full speed. Instead, you wait, enter when doors open before you, regardless of where you may be taken. If there were once maps, signs, or signals, they've since been erased. Don't stop now. The first morning jolt of doingness is like a triple espresso. If I just sit myself down before it all begins, before dressing, before fully waking, and start with the dreams vanished. He's saying goodbye through a door, and I only half hear. Could it look all right with thoughts coiled and pinned? Maybe the right pins, but these slide so nicely. Should I stop imagining the exile pleasure? I've developed a taste for even stronger green shots of revulsion. It's like a deal I make with myself over and over. Being invincible isn't just for mothers, but no one else knows this. Actually, the message has been sent several times. Should I really believe she meant to sculpt my reservations into binding backdrops? I was just standing there minding my curtains. Too many messages, not enough mind garlands. I miss you more than you've ever replaced those words. The other night, I began stating superlatives, and you happily repeated every one. You may not remember you, me, or anyone, but I will remember us, we, and them for us all. You may not recall the meanings of words, but the tones of your voice still transmit voluminous inclinations. I wish everyone could believe the dying are still living. You are still alive. Would it be presumptuous if I gave her a name? And yet, I do not hesitate to affectionately place titles at the top of every stage we go through. Countless scenes in which I am your granddaughter. Today, you would have been 104. And this other absence, I'll call her Violet, triumphant and numerous, smiling up at me from the lawn, startlingly awake. Impossible to write the word impossible. Instead, I will write how to love our broken paucity. My idea of perfect beforehands isn't even worth rewrapping. Still, I bother to transpose myself. It's part of your private profile to see my faithful sidereal transmissions prearranged by passing stars. Can you see a lily planting constellations? Her hand looks exactly like mine. What do I do to be that person? Forward flight, forward flight, forward, a careful, solitary friction. Call me when you love it. Leaves, I like your thinking, to write through an entire life, nothing being always fantastic. Having read the entire alphabet once, twice, mess with it. Off with my head, clear my desk, dis-ease become other, afraid of prying lists. What have I done? The number of numbers kept us wet and cold, subsisting on syntactical nimbus. You wanted her ring, and I was happy for you to have it. I'm so glad she left me her hands. Thank you.